My name is Jeff Barrett. I'm a product engineer with software development team. I'm based out of Olympia, Washington, and I wear a couple hats in the company. One is I work for the holistic testing team, and so I work a lot with customers like yourselves. I go on site or they come to my office and try and build things for you, build applications for you to identify what requirements we need to better our software. It's primarily how ArcPymapping was born, was by user requirements. I'm also a product engineer, and I'm on the map automation team, and specifically I'm part of the ArcPymapping part of map automation. So I've been working with ArcPymapping since its inception, so we've been working on it for about 5 years now. How many of you have dabbled with ArcPymapping? Okay, that's good. I have some questions for you. So it was released in 10.0 a couple years ago, and it's part of the geoprocessing framework. So if you're familiar with the old command line in the geoprocessing framework, it's now the Python window. Everything that you did with geoprocessing, it's now extended, and you can do things with map documents and layer files to automate the contents within them. I like to think of it as an easy-to-use scripting framework that allows me to do things to map documents. Because I think of map documents as a big container of objects, right? It has layers, it has data frames. Map documents have layout elements, legends, and scale bars. And once I attach to a map document, I can do things to those. Like I can update extents, or I can turn layers on or off, or I can change the symbology of features. And then, obviously, I'm doing this with a map automation context, so maybe I can export out to PDF and then change the extent and do something again and export to PDF and then manage those PDFs to put them all into a multi-page PDF to produce a product that I can share. Layers are objects in a map document. Layers have data sources, so I can use ArcPymapping to automatically go in and find all the layers in my map documents on my system and replace out the C drive with the M drive. So without ever opening up my map documents and having to deal with those little red exclamation marks, I can use ArcPymapping to manage data sources and update layer symbologies. And because it's a scripting API that has all sorts of methods and properties, well, then I can use that information to generate reports. Show me all the map documents I have out of my system, or show me all the map documents that are using a particular data source, because I know I'm going to take that data source offline, and now I need to know all the projects out there that require or need to be updated. There's lots and lots and lots of things to do. We can automate the exporting and printing of map documents. And of course, we can also automate map production and create map books. I just got done teaching a map book session, and I let everyone there know that I had to teach them ArcPymapping in addition to data-driven pages. Because data-driven pages by themselves aren't map books. Map books are much more than just the map pages. They're the title page, the table of contents, the street index pages at the end, all put together as a single product. That's a map book. So why did we build it? How many of you tried dabbling with ArcObjects? How many of you loved it? All right, you geek. A lot of people, GIS analysts, were kind of forced to become these hardcore programmers when ArcObjects came out, right? I mean, fine granularity. You could do anything. You could customize the interface. And if you could do it in the interface, you could also do it with ArcObjects, and you could do even more. But it was really overwhelming, right? And what we tried to do is create a scripting framework that's coarser-grained for the GIS analyst, that's much more natural language, easy to understand, and easy to execute. In ArcPymapping, for example, we have a function called exports to PDF. Yes, it exports to PDF. And it's one line of code. In ArcObjects, it's about 100 lines of code. Right? Because we provide you all that granularity. So we've made it a lot easier. And I hope that by the time you leave this room, you're going to agree with me that this is really easy stuff. maybe my mother can do it. It's an environment for basic map layer management. Okay, it's not ArcObjects. Okay, it doesn't do everything that ArcObjects can do, and you guys keep asking me to do those things, and it's like, well, where do we draw the line in the sand, right? This is ArcObjects, this is ArcPy. And we'll talk about some of those capabilities. And another really nice benefit is because we're part of the geoprocessing framework, anything that you do with ArcPy mapping can be published as a geoprocessing service. So if you have some sort of ArcPy script that allows someone in a web interface to specify an extent, and behind the scenes you send that extent to an ArcPy mapping script, and we can generate a map book and send it back to the web client as a PDF. Okay. So a quick tour of ArcPy mapping and what it is. Now remember, ArcPy is the geoprocessing framework. Okay, that's the ArcPy site package. When you install ArcGIS on your system, anything 10 and later, you're going to get ArcPy automatically installed. And then within that, we have submodules. So at the ArcPy level are all the traditional geoprocessing functions like buffer and clip. And then to further organize things and separate out all that complexity, we've modularized ArcPy. So we have the data access module, or we have the geostatistical analyst module, or the spatial analyst module, and of course mapping. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. When we work with ArcPy mapping, there are a limited number of classes and functions and properties. And this is just a small sample of the things that we can work with. But yes, we can get to picture elements. And if we get to a picture element, we can move it around in the layout. Maybe we can swap out the source image so that we can dynamically change pictures, okay, without having to open up a map document and doing it manually. We have things like layers and map documents and data frames. Yes, we can get to data frames, and I can change the scale, the rotation, the extent, the coordinate system. I can do all sorts of things dynamically by connecting to that data frame using ArcPy. And we have functions that allow us to insert layers or add layers or get a list of the layers and then do something with them. And that's what I'm going to be going through today. We also have other classes. And again, this isn't the complete list, but we have data-driven pages. We talked about that in an earlier session. So ArcPy mapping can talk to data-driven pages. So when I go from next page to next page to next page, I can have ArcPy mapping do additional stuff that data-driven pages can't do. I can extend it. PDF document, we can manage documents. And that's exactly how you generate map books. You create a document, you append pages to it, and you build a final product. It's a multi-page PDF. A bunch of export operations. So where do we do all this? How do I even start with ArcPy mapping? Where do I start typing? Well, what we give you with ArcGIS 10 and later is the Python window. And that's full-fledged Python right there. You can just start typing non-ArcPy mapping stuff. You can start typing Python statements, and it just works. Okay? But again, of course, we're GIS, and we can extend the capabilities of Python and mapping. And so we expose our API through the Python window. It's a perfect way to start learning how to work with Python. Of course, you could open up other IDEs like Notepad++ or Wing or IDLE, which is something that we give you out of the box. And that looks like a notepad. And that's where you just start typing all your commands. And the only other thing you need to do is you got to run it. Python window, it's one line at a time, and you execute it. If you want to take all that stuff that you've typed and store it in a file, then you're going to use an IDE. You're not going to necessarily use the Python window. But we'll talk about that. I like it because it shows me beautiful IntelliSense. I test things in the Python window. I see the behavior in the map document. And I just simply copy and paste that code into my real IDE. Okay, so ArcPy mapping help. I'm going to actually show this. This is just showing you the location of where it is organized inside of the help system. You'll see this in a minute. Okay, so let me show you the Python window and how I get started and some of the things that I do in terms of setup. So I'm going to escape out of here, and I'm going to go to this incredibly bad layout. But it has all the pieces that I want to work with today, and we're focusing on ArcPy mapping, not cartography. So we can open up the Python window several different ways. I can either open it here, or I can go to the geoprocessing menu and choose Python. And when you open it up for the first time, it's this really weird-looking, undocked dialog that has a couple of panes. And again, remember, if I type arcpy.buffer, if I could spell it, here's the buffer command. And it shows us all the parameters, and we can just march through this. The thing that I don't like about the initial setup here is I like to just right-click and go to Help Placement and choose Bottom. And then when I type arcpy.buffer, again, if I could type, I think this works a little bit better because now I see the help below, and it follows the parameter order the way that I would be typing it in the window above. Just a nice little tip. But I'm not here to talk about buffer. If I type arcpy.sa, we'll see all of the spatial analyst related functions and properties that are available. Okay. If I type arcpy mapping and then dot, well, then I can get to a lot of those different functions that I was displaying a little bit earlier. Okay, so it's just organized in a module within ArcPy. So it's a submodule. I'm going to open up Help. And I'll go to the location where ArcPy mapping and all of that help is displayed. So I'll go to Desktop, Geoprocessing. Then there's this book called ArcPy. And then under ArcPy, there's the mapping module. Of course, there's the spatial analyst module, network module, etc. So under this, there's some really nice documents or topics that we've developed for you. One is just an introduction to ArcPy mapping. Another one is a tutorial, getting started with ArcPy mapping, guidelines, gotchas, things to think about when you're authoring these map documents that you want to automate. Alphabetical list of classes. How many of you have worked with AML? I know it's getting a little old. Wow, it's awesome. All right. I love AML. And when we developed ArcPy mapping, trust me, I had AML in mind. Okay, so one of the first things I did is I created these help topics that were very much like the commands list in the AML books, right? Here's data-driven pages, here are all the methods, here are all the properties, and you can just go through all of these. These are the things that you print and you put next to your desk. Okay, I have these next to my desk. If we want to know all the standalone functions, ArcPy mapping functions, there they are. If you don't know what they do, click on them, and they bring you to a more detailed discussion. But in terms of just understanding what functions and properties are available to me, having a printout of these two help topics are very nice. It's about a total of 8 pages. It's really not that big. If I drill further into my classes, we're going to go to the map document class. This is the class that allows us to attach to a map document in MXD out on disk. Right? We have very extensive discussions about how it works and this word current and how current works, and you'll see that in my slides. And then, of course, we have all the methods and properties. But down at the bottom, we have samples. We have 200 samples specific to ArcPy mapping in all of these different classes all over the place. We have one-to-many samples for every single function. So we design them so that you can just simply copy and paste this stuff into your Python window or into your IDE. So this very simple script, 4 lines of code, will look at my map document and list for me all of the layers that are in it. Okay? So I'll just come back over here, I'll paste, I'll hit enter, and then there, of course, are all of my layers, right? They're listed for me. There they are. Right? It's all the same layers. Very simple operation, copy and paste. Let me clear this. We can also load Python scripts into the Python window, and we can also save them. Okay, so anything that we type, even our typos, will get written out to a file. So that's another way of kind of, again, learning it, saving it out, and then modifying it in your IDE. Okay. Let's go back to the slides, and we're going to just slowly go through this. And we'll learn about individual objects one at a time, or a couple at a time. So the map document object, the most important object. You have to understand this, because this is typically your entry point into ArcPy mapping. The other entry point would be layer files. I want to connect to a layer file because I want to fix data sources, or I want to update symbology, or do something like that. But the map document object allows me to attach to a map document and then start playing with all the things inside of it. So we have methods like save and save a copy, updating data sources. We have properties like updating the author or the credits. So when we want to open map documents within ArcPy mapping, we use the arcpymapping map document function. When we use the map document function, it returns a map document object. Okay? Now it takes a path to an MXD. It's just one parameter. Path to MXD out on disk. So again, I can be running these scripts completely outside of ArcMap. I'm running them from my IDE. I'm scheduling them to run at midnight. Whatever I'm doing, it's going to just simply connect to that MXD out on disk. It's not physically opening the map document. It's just connecting to it in memory, and then we're going to start doing things to it. So if I reference a map document on disk, I just simply pass in some MXD, some path to some MXD. Also, again, really good for learning and for kind of testing your code and your logic before trying to run it in this external IDE. We have the idea of actually running your code against the ArcMap application, the map document that's currently loaded inside of ArcMap. So we use the keyword current only in those situations where ArcMap is physically open and my script is running against the objects that I'm physically looking at, versus going out to disk and doing it to that thing out there. So again, the documentation talks about out to disk or to current and when to use them. And if you develop a script tool that runs from a geoprocessing toolbar or a toolbox, those can be engineered or scripted to work against the current map document. So you double click on a tool and it's working all right there. It's not going out to disk or doing anything. When we're working with current, there's just a couple of rules. I've always thought of like writing the 10 commandments to ArcPy mapping, right? Thou shalt always run in the foreground when I'm using current. Because if you're using background geoprocessing, then it doesn't know what a map document is. Because you're running everything external to the application. And then the other thing that happens when you're working with the Python window, and you're going to see this, is sometimes you type a command and you just don't immediately see that result in the map document. You're like, oh, I just turned off a layer. How come it didn't turn off? And there's a longer explanation to it, but it really comes down to performance. We're not executing refreshes every single time you do something, right? That would just, you take a performance hit. So when you want to see that update, then just call the refresh, and you'll see that, and you'll see my code. Limitations. This is always the fun conversation that I have, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper with a beyond the basics of ArcPy mapping, which is another session that is tomorrow and Thursday. ArcPy mapping does not allow you to create new objects. Okay? Because ArcPy mapping is not a complete replacement for ArcObjects. So imagine if on some map sheets I have one data frame and on other map sheets I have two data frames. What do? Well, we don't give you the ability to create a data frame, because if we did, then think of all of the data frame properties. Think of how exhaustive our API would need to be to allow you to do everything that you can do in data frame properties. So what we're going to tell you to do is use ArcMap and all of its buttons and context menus to author a map. And you're only going to use ArcPy mapping to automate that map. So what do we do with the two data frame issue? Two data frames. Page 1 has one data frame, one extent. Page 2 of your map series has two data frames, different extents. Well, all I'm going to tell you to do is author your map document with 2 data frames and put one of those data frames off the page. So when you export page 1, you get 1 data frame. Then you're using Python magic to move that other data frame in place and change its extent and do all that stuff. Export page 2. Okay? So it's not that big of a deal. You can't even create a new map document using ArcPy mapping. The trick? Author an untitled MXD, connect to it with ArcPy mapping, add your layers, do whatever you want, export whatever the scenario is. So we can't create new objects because we don't want ArcPy mapping to be as complicated and as big as ArcObjects. Okay, so let's work with map documents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Python window and I'm going to just drag it to the bottom of my application. This is typically how I have things configured when I work back in the office. If I go to File in the Map Document Properties, you can see that I don't have much going on here. I don't have credits or an author or a title. I can see that my relative paths are turned on. So I'm going to connect to this map document. Okay, and I'm going to create a variable that's just going to receive the object, the map document object. It's going to be referencing this map document object in memory. And I'm going to make that equal to arcpy.mapping. You have no idea how many times I've typed this in 5 years. And I'm going to type map document, and then I'm going to type in current. Okay. I'm not going out to a file on disk. I'm just working with the current layout that's currently in ArcMap. I'm going to hit enter. And then when I type mxd dot, things that are relevant to the map document object become available in my pull down here. So I can set the active view, I can set the author, I can set the title, I can check relative paths. Let's do a couple of these. I'll say title equals arcpy.mapping. It's a string, so I'm going to embed it in single or double quotes. Author equals me. And maybe I'll just print using a standard Python print statement. I'll print mxd dot relative paths. And that's printing true. So it's showing me that relative paths are turned on. So let's say you have hundreds of map documents out there and you're about to do a big data migration and everything's going to be broken. Unless you just go in and turn relative paths on for all your map documents. Very simple script for every MXD in this folder. Connect to it, turn relative paths, or set relative paths equal to true, and then save. So what do? We're going to save these changes. First, let's see if anything happened. I go to map document properties. There's my title. There's me. I've made changes. But if I were to close this application right now, I didn't save them. They're all gone. Right? So we have commands that allow us to save our changes. So I'm going to type mxd.save a copy. Because I want to do this demo again, I'm not going to type save and hit enter. Because then I would have saved me in ArcPy mapping. So I'm going to save it out to another file. Save a copy. And I'm going to go to my, let's say I'll just go to my temp. So I'll do rctemp. And I'll call it testing123.mxd. Now, optionally, there's another parameter here called version. Oop, I forgot. I was waiting for someone to ask that. I'll bring that up. Okay, so there's another option here called version. So I can save my map document out to previous versions. Right? So that's nice. It's another nice automation thing that we've given you. I'm just going to save it out to my current. And I'm going to hit enter. And if I come over here to ctemp, there's testing123. And I've created that map document. If I were to close this map document, cartography, right now without saving, I would have lost everything. Okay? And the question is, what is the R? The R stands for raw. Okay? Raw text. So in Python, there are these special characters. A backslash is a special character. So if you have a backslash and an N in a string, that's a new line. Or a backslash and a T, that's a tab. So you can insert new lines or tabs within strings. I'm saying, hey, ignore that and just treat it as a raw string. Because if you have a backslash T, it's not going to think of it as a temp folder. It's going to try and insert a tab between the colon and the E. Okay? So raw just says ignore it. The other way of formatting your strings is that you can make all of these forward slashes, and that's not a problem. Oops. Right, I can make all of these forward slashes, and this would work just fine. But when you copy and paste system paths from Microsoft, you get backslashes. So I just hit R and then paste in my path. The other thing you can do is you can do double backslashes. And if you have the double backslashes or the forward slashes, you don't need that R. Okay. Let's just go right back to the PowerPoint here.
Is there a list of those special characters somewhere?
Are there a list of those special characters? Probably. I usually learn by mistake. I'm sure there is. If you were to go to Python documentation and look up the string object, you're going to see a lot of those things. Python documentation is awesome. It's really good. If I can't figure out how to do something, I just go to Bing or Google and I type Python random number because I'm trying to calculate or generate a random number. And it's amazing how many hits. Just always prefix everything with Python and what you're trying to do. So the other thing I want to show you is map layers and data frames. Okay? We have these list functions. They're at the ArcPymapping root level. And we can list layers or we can list data frames. And what these do is they return lists. They return lists of layers or they return lists of data frames. So in this particular example, I'm typing df equals ArcPymapping list data frames. List data frames where? The parameter is the input map document. Well, we've already created that variable. So I'm going to pass in my MXD. And if I didn't have that 0 with the brackets around it, that would have returned a Python list. But I don't want a Python list. I want a data frame. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, go return the first data frame of that list. It's a 0-based indexes. So the first item in the list is index 0. So this will return for me the first data frame in my table of contents, the one at the top. Okay? There are other ways of returning data frames. Similar to layers, and once I get to layers, I can set things like definition queries and visibility. So let's look at that. I'm going to just kind of go right to the demonstration. And so we're going to find layers and turn them on and off, and we're going to modify the scale and rotation of a data frame, and we'll zoom to selected features. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go get my data frame. And I'm going to type df equals arcpy.mapping.list data frames. And it's telling me it's looking for a map document. So I'll just type in the variable that I've already created, mxd. And then, optionally, there's this wildcard. So I could type in the name of the data frame. So it would return that. Whether I use the wildcard or not, and it's only going to return one data frame, it's still going to return a list. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. I'm just going to say, go out and get the first data frame. And I'll hit, actually, no. Right now, I'm saying just go out and get me all the data frames. I hit enter. And if I type df dot, what's that? Append, count, extend, index, insert. These are all things you do to list objects. I don't want a list object. I want a data frame object. So I'm going to backspace here. I'm going to up arrow, and I'm going to just do this. Now I'm getting my first data frame. I could have gotten it by name. And if I type df dot, now things start to look similar. Element, height, and position. Where is it on the page? The extent. Geographic transformation, map units, rotation, etc. So now I have a data frame object. Now that I have that, I can do things. Okay? But I'm not going to do anything yet. I'm going to go find a layer called Great Lakes. And I'm going to turn the Great Lakes off. So in order for me to turn the layer off, I have to reference it. So I'm going to go lyr, just a variable name. I can call it anything. I'm going to type arcpy.mapping list layers. It's looking for an MXD. It's looking for a wildcard, so I could do something like great. And are you looking for a layer anywhere in the map document or specifically in a data frame? Well, I've already created my data frame object, so I'm going to look for a layer that starts with great in this specific data frame. And again, I'm going to return the first item in the list. If I've done the proper query, it should be the only item in the list. So 0 should always work. And I hit enter. So now I type layer dot, and there we go. We have brightness, we have contrast, data source. So again, I can dynamically change data sources. If we come down to the bottom, there's visible. And I'm going to say equals false. Turning it off, right? True is on and false is off. And I'm going to hit enter. Nothing happened. Okay? I still see my lakes. They're still checked on in the table of contents. Remember, I told you, every once in a while we need to refresh. If you're running a standalone script from an IDE, you don't have to do this refresh stuff. It just takes care of itself. But if you want ArcMap, the current ArcMap to refresh, then you have to call this command. So I'm going to call arcpy.refresh active view. And because it's a function, no parameters, I still need the open and close parentheses. There we go. My lakes turned off here, they turned off over here. Now this is how I would create a thematic map, right? I'm not changing my extent, but I'm turning layers on and off, export to PDF. Turn another set of layers on and off, export to PDF, put all those PDFs together. I have a thematic map. Okay, I'll turn the lakes back on. Okay, let's take our data frame and let's rotate it. df.rotate equals, or rotation equals, I'll say 25. arcpy.refresh. Actually, I can just up arrow to bring it back. Now I've just rotated my data frame. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to start working with feature selection. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to select Lake Superior. And I want to now zoom to the extent of a selected feature. How do I do that? A couple ways. I could go to df dot.
Can I stop you there for a sec? Why did the Great Lakes come back on?
I can't hear what you're saying. What?
Sorry, did you click the Great Lakes to turn them back on?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, I turned the Great Lakes back on because I didn't want to type another line of code. That was bad. That was a lazy moment. I wasn't avoiding any bugs. It would have worked. Wasn't smoke and mirrors. So I'm going to take df, zoom to selected features, and I'm going to hit enter. And it zooms to selected features. And now I'm going to click zoom to previous extent. And I'm going to zoom to selected features a different way. I don't want to zoom to all the selected features in a data frame. I want to zoom to the selected features for a specific layer, right? That would be equivalent to right-clicking on a layer and choosing zoom to selection, right? I'll do it. df.extent equals layer.getSelectedExtent. I can do that. Same thing. So again, the functions and properties that we're making available to you are all things that are related to map automation. You're creating map books. You want to change extents. You're doing analysis. You want to zoom to the extent of something, export to PDF, or do something. Okay? Okay. ArcPy mapping, page layouts. Now this is where you as the author, you as the developer need to author a page layout or a map document so that you know how to get to the objects that you want to manipulate. So all layout elements inside of a layout have an element name. And you can give these elements a specific name. And then now you know how to find those elements programmatically using your wildcard. If I want to go find the picture element, I happen to call it picture, I'm going to do list layout elements and picture as my wildcard. I'm going to use my bracket 0 and now I found it. Now that I found it, I can change all these properties. Its X, Y position, its width, its height. Over here, the picture tab has a source path. I can change the source path. That's what I'm going to do now. Okay. So let me go back to ArcMap, and let me go back to the layout. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. What I want to do is I want to change my Esri logo. This is the old Esri logo. I'm sorry, this is the old ESRI logo. And I'm going to change it to the Esri logo. And I'll do that by just first selecting that feature. I'll right-click. I'll go into Properties. And again, we have Picture tab. This is the path to that image out on disk. I'm going to click the size and position, and I'll see that we have an element name called logo. Okay? I can call it anything, but I happen to call it logo because it made sense to me at the time. So that's how I'm going to get that picture element. So I'm going to create a variable, element equals arcpy.mapping.listLayoutElements. What I want to get? Well, I'm finding layout elements within the map document that I referenced previously. And what type of element? There are these filters that we can search. So I don't want a data frame element. I want a picture element. And then again, optionally, I can specify the wildcard name. And then, again, I'm always going to use my bracket 0 bracket. If I did the right search, it should just be one item, and that's the item I want. So I hit enter. And now if I type element dot, you'll see that I can change its height and its position, where it is, its source image. So let me do that. I'm going to change its source image. And to do that, I need to remember where I'm referencing all this stuff. So I'm going to go to Introduction ArcPy Mapping. And I have this image called New Logo. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Shift button. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Copy as Path. Okay, it's my favorite hidden trick. I'm going to now take element dot source image, and I'm going to set that equal to R Control V. Right? That's why R works really nicely with copying and pasting system paths, because I have all those embedded backslashes. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to type arcpy.refresh active view, and we're happy. Okay? We're Esri again. So what I've shown you is incredibly easy stuff. Okay? Nothing hard. I found my map document, I found my layers or my data frames or my layout elements using the appropriate list function with the appropriate wildcard, used my appropriate index number, and I got the object and I manipulated it. So other things we can do is we can export. Right? This is obviously where you're going. You're automating things to sort of create an output. Maybe you're not going to export to PDF, but maybe you're going to do all these manipulations and save out to a different MXD and save it that way. Oftentimes, you guys are going to be exporting to PDF, and so we have the appropriate number of classes and functions to support all that. So let me show you a couple of examples here. I have a map book that contains a title page, a whole bunch of pages that were generated by data-driven pages, and then at the end, we have street index pages. Data-driven pages was used to produce those 20 pages. A a Python site package called ReportLab was used to generate the street index pages. And then there was this other little page that was generated that's a PDF. So those are represented by 3 individual files. And they end up being one contiguous. So without scaring you, I'm not going to try and scare you. And the sample that I'm showing you is completely available and downloadable. Get all the code, all the data. There's a tutorial that brings you through the whole process. But what I want to do is I just want to open up this script. Question is, what is idle? That is an IDE that comes with our install of Python. It's kind of like Notepad, but it knows Python syntax, so you get special text coloring, whether it's a function or a statement. It gives you indentation commands because Python is very indent sensitive. And I'll show you at the end how to just create a brand new IDLE document and copy and paste code into it. Please don't try and read this. Okay, don't. It wouldn't be healthy. Okay, go through the tutorial and it may be healthy. But you'll see at the beginning, I'm going in and let me see, I'm setting my map document and I'm passing in the path to the map document that I want to work with. All of this stuff here is very specific to creating those index pages. ReportLab is a PDF authoring tool that allows you to create very, very elaborate output products. And I've designed that PDF using all this code. Look at add a vertical line or horizontal line and add some text. These are all just simple coordinates. But what I want to show you is way down here is I'm going in and I'm creating a PDF document. And I'm passing the path out to be final mapbook.pdf. And then to that, I'm simply appending pages. So I'm appending my title page, I'm appending my map pages from the data-driven pages output, and I'm also appending my index pages. And then I'm going to save and close that. And that, right there, those 4 lines of code or 5 lines of code have created my map book. Okay. Now all the stuff up above, most of that was all ReportLab magic. The ArcPy mapping portion is very, very, very simple. So we're going to use ArcPy mapping to generate our map books by using very simple to use code. I'm going to show you another product. Here's an example of another application. I thought it was here. Oh, here it is. Worked with Clark County, Washington. And here's a thematic map book where they have all of these elements that were generated, part of the PDF. This page was the most difficult page to produce because there are about 40 different geoprocessing parameters that are printed to this page, and it goes to a second column if it's needed, and it does all this stuff. This was pure ArcPy. This wasn't even ReportLab. But the point is this is a mixture of ArcPy mapping and geoprocessing to create a thematic map book. That's all that it is. And all I'm doing is I'm connecting to layers and I'm turning them on and off. A few lines of code between each page, and I'm exporting out to PDF. Another example, this is ClimateWise or the Geos Institute. They've created a series of map books. All the scientific information is up front, and then they talk about their predictive weather modeling in maps down below. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show you too while I was here is I have, let's see, I want to open up the catalog window. I have some script tools that are available for download, and I'm going to give you all the links to these downloads. Everything that I've shown today is downloadable. I have a script tool right here that will do a find and replace on a text string. So let's do find and replace. Rather than working with the current document, I'm going to browse to a map document out on disk. I'm going to say, hey, take 1999 and replace it with 2013. And there's some options that I have here. And then I'm going to save this out as testing 456. Did that not work for me? Okay, and I'm going to run it. Now this is a script tool. The script tool has already gone out. It's done my searches and replaces. It's saved the result out to a new MXD, and then I'm just using a Python start file function to automatically open the result. So here's the result. If I zoom in closely, again, we're not zoomed in the same way because I never saved that previous document before. But here we have 213, 213, 213, all completely replaced. I'll close this. I'll go back to the original map document. If I right-click on this and I choose Edit, I can look at the script tool. All the red text are just comments, so forget all the red text. These are all my input parameters, right? My input map document, my output map document, my find, my replace, all that stuff. And then I just have a few lines of code. Referencing my map document, I'm referencing it out on disk. I'm, for each element in arcpymapping, list layout element, so I'm going to iterate through every single element in that layout if it's a text element. And then I'm simply going to replace the old text with the new text. Right, here's the replace function. This is more complicated than it needs to be because that tool has all those different options, match case, within a string, etc. Okay, another really powerful use of ArcPymapping is updating data sources. Okay, how many of you have changed drives and broken map documents? How many of you have moved data from one server, SDE server, to another SDE server, and all your map documents, right? So there is a very thorough updating and fixing data sources with ArcPymapping document that's available. And you're going to start seeing a lot of these shortened URLs. So if you were to just write down http://esriurl.com, then I'm going to be giving you a bunch of numbers to follow. And if you just type in that short URL and then type 4628, it's going to bring you to that help topic. Okay. What I want to do is I want to show you how to update data sources. Okay. So I'm going to come back over to this set of script tools. And there are about 20 script tools that we made available to you. Some that are related to cartography, others that are exporting and printing, and then those that are just basic map document management tools. Before I do this, if I look at my data sources, you'll see that I'm currently pointing to an MDB. All of my layers in this map document are currently MDB. I also come to this layer right here and I go to its properties, you'll see that it has a definition query. It's looking out for specific states. Well, we all know that if we're working with a personal geodatabase, we have to have double quotes around field names. And if we're working with a file geodatabase, we have to have square brackets. So if I were to convert and redirect all this data from a personal geodatabase and direct it to a file geodatabase, I'm going to get display errors because the definition query is not going to work. So I'm going to try and fix that too. I hope. So down here at the bottom, I have a tool called Update MXD from Personal to File. And this can be any type. You can go from shape to personal or shape to SDE. I mean, that document that we have is very, very extensive. So I'm going to browse to my personal geodatabase. So that's my background data MDB. Okay? And then in my output file geodatabase will be my background data FGDB. And my map document that I want to fix is this one. And my output map document will be 789. So I'm going to run this, cross my fingers, and hope that it works. It takes seconds. It's done. It's saved out the map document. And now it's opening up that 789 MXD to see the results. Come over here. Come over here. FGDB, GDB. If I come to northeast, or the landlocked states, and I go to the properties of that, why didn't that update? Don't know why that didn't update. Anyway, I'm going to show you the code that fixed it, even though it didn't. Let me go back here. And the point here, though, is the simplicity of the code. Again, we have a bunch of red text at the top. Here's our input geodatabase, our output geodatabase, our input and output MXDs, right? Whether or not we wanted you to fix the SQL structure. Then, again, we reference the map document using that path out to the file on disk. On the map document, we replace workspaces with, take the input geodatabase that is an access or personal geodatabase and replace that with the output geodatabase that happens to be a file geodatabase. These are keywords. Okay, I didn't just type those. Those are available in a drop-down pick list and show me all the different workspace types that I can go back and forth from. Okay, that's it. That's replace workspaces. I can do replace workspaces in 3 lines of code. Import ArcPy, reference MXD, 4 lines of code. Replace data source, save. Done. Then I just decided we'd get a little tricky here, and if that option is checked, and if that layer supports the definition query, then take that layer definition query and replace the square bracket. Oh, that's why it didn't work. I didn't have square brackets originally. See, I messed up my data. Okay. So the original data should have had square brackets, and I should have replaced the square brackets with double quotes. So I bet that original map document that I had open wasn't rendering those layers, those labels. So that was my mistake. But trust me, it would work. And you can download it, and you can verify it. Okay? So then, yeah, I'm doing the same thing with label classes, right? I'm going to my layer. My layer supports label classes. Then, again, take that SQL query and replace square brackets with a single quote. Okay, let's save it out to the output MXD, and let's have Python automatically open the results so we can see it. I must have accidentally saved that other map document. I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong. Okay, moving right along here. So what I want to finish with is to remind you that anything that you can do with ArcPy mapping in the desktop with subtle changes in terms of setting up workspaces and setting up how certain parameters are passed, you can publish that as a geoprocessing service and make it available on the web. So that developer packet I showed you where I showed you that thematic map. Well, that user experience is they go to the Clark County website, they go to that web application, they type in their username, all their credentials, their credit card information, and they click the Go button. You know, they enter in the parcels of interest. They click the Go button, and it produces a 20-page report for the developer that helps them determine, you know, what are all the criteria and things that are happening in and around this parcel. What are the closest schools? What are the slopes? What are the soils? And it's really win-win for the county to make this service available, and the $50 is essentially just cost. But the developer saves thousands of dollars by not having to generate his own report. And it's in the format that the county wants it in. So we're going to be, and actually who just entered the room is Jeff Molds here. He works with me in the ArcPy mapping team, and he focuses a lot on the server capabilities as well as desktop. And tomorrow we're doing a Beyond the Basics of ArcPy mapping, and we're going to introduce you to some really advanced capabilities and really give you a sense of what can be done. I've just given you the ABCs, and tomorrow we're going to really give you the XYZs.
That would include the looping through the...
Right. Yeah. I didn't talk about looping here because I'm not trying to teach Python. I'm just trying to introduce you to the capabilities of what ArcPy mapping can do. Tomorrow we'll look a little bit in more detail at the code and give you more ideas in terms of what can be done. So in terms of the resources available, again, here are all those shortened URLs, http://esriurl.com. And if you just want to get to the Resource Center, the web help, that's 4623. If you want to get to our forums, then the Map Automation forum is 4624, and the Python forum is 4625. Great resources for learning how to do things and getting help from your fellow colleagues. If you want to get to all of the samples online, if you go to 4626, so we've created an ArcPy mapping group in ArcGIS Online. And if I click on this, I think I'm connected to the internet. It's going to bring me to that group. And you'll see that some of these samples will be showing in the Beyond the Basics. But this one down here is the one that I showed you. These are all the 20 sample scripts tools. And this one right here is the Generate Mapbooks with Index Pages with the Report Lab. That's this sample. Tomorrow we'll be talking about other samples that we have available that are much more sophisticated in terms of capabilities. So the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that tomorrow we have Beyond the Basics of ArcPy Mapping at 3:15, and then again Thursday at 8:30. And then before everyone runs out, if you filled out a survey, you can come put them on the front desk here. I'd really appreciate it, or I don't know if there's someone back there collecting them. But please leave your surveys in the room and we'll try and get them. And I will take any questions that you guys have. And Jeff is here to also help me with questions. Thank you. I'm falling apart here. Yes?
Is there an environment that's similar to like Visual Studio or something?
Okay.
Or label those text boxes and everything?
Right, so the question is, those dialogues that I used for those scripts tools, those were GP tool dialogues. Okay, so I added parameters, I specified the input type, and those inputs were then passed to my Python script and I just marched along. There are ways of using other Python site packages that allow you to design your own forms. The problem is not a lot of them are very stable and work well. I've gotten in the habit of just using pure GP tools because they work fine and they do everything I need them to do. Jeff, do you remember the one that we support that's the most stable? It's like something Q. Python Qt, that's it. That has been found to be the most stable with working with our geoprocessing framework. That's something that we're working on, but right now it's just we don't support it really. So use geoprocessing script tools and just pass the parameters that way. Or, I'm sorry, geoprocessing tool dialogues. Okay? Any other questions? Yes?
Is it possible to alter page layout or page properties? I like the page size, landscape, portrait.
Right, so great question. Is it possible to change page size or orientation using ArcPy mapping? And the answer is no. But it's okay. We have a solution for you. You may have a map book that alternates between landscape and portrait depending on the shape of your features that you want to display. What we're going to tell you to do is author 2 map documents. One in landscape, one in portrait, or one this size, another that size. And then run your scripts, against those appropriate map documents. Using your appropriate scripting logic, you can export everything out to individual PDFs and then just merge them all together into one super PDF. But we don't support the ability to do that with ArcPy mapping because think about it. If I just let you change the page size, I've just really messed up your layout, right? So now you have to know very precisely how to reposition everything, and it's just, again, we don't want to be ArcObjects. We don't want to make it too complicated, author two maps. We have a very nice facing pages ArcPy mapping sample where you have margin, and you have a right page and you have a left page, and you have different margins for your binding. We show you how to stitch all those together. So you have one map document that represents the left page, another map document the right page, and we put them all together. Good question. Hey, Greg. Can I go back to the previous? Yes. Oh, and I guess I'm supposed to tell you before I forget. It's too late. Everyone's gone. This is offering 1216 if you're going to fill out the survey. You wanted to see these? Okay. Yeah, tomorrow, 3:15, room 1A, B, and then Thursday, Beyond the Basics, 8:30.
Can you go back to the document, the previous slide?
You want me to go previous?
Yeah.
Oh, resources. Yes, very good. You want to take a picture of it. You got to love cameras. Yeah, Jeff and I have put together a lot of content for you guys to download and play with and learn from, and come see us tomorrow too. Any other questions? Yes?
When you're doing the query and you just return the first selection of the list index, what if you do your query wrong and will get nothing or get more than one thing if you don't use that
Right.
selection?
Right.
So your next function, will that work on both or however?
No, it won't. So basically, your next function is probably to do something to a data frame, for example, right? So to answer your first question is, what happens if nothing's returned? You're going to get a list index out of range error. It's a classic error. You're trying to return something, but nothing got returned, right? Because your wildcard was bad or something. If 3 objects were returned, and you thought it was just one, and you thought it was, a data frame, and your next line of code is df.extent blah, but you're really working against a list object, it doesn't have the extent property, and you're going to get an error that says extent not recognized, or whatever the exact language is. So yeah, you're going to get errors, and so you're going to want to trap for that sort of stuff. And again, you're the author, so you know the map document better than anyone else. You know the code better, so you're designing the two to work together. But there's all sorts of error trapping that you can do with Python, and it's up to you and how you want to handle it.
I was maybe wondering how you know you got the right thing, but we didn't see any of those errors in your text.
I've done this before. Yeah.
Which is good. Nobody really wants to see an error.
Yeah. Well, you did, didn't I make? Yeah, I did make an error. I saved the wrong document. But yeah, good point. And Python has wonderful error trapping. And then that's really where you want to choose the right IDE to do debugging, because IDLE is not a good debugger at all unless you like working with print statements. And then you work with Python Wing, and it's just much more sophisticated, elaborate. You can put in your breakpoints and trace things and call stacks, and it's up to you. Yes.
How do you connect to those sample scripts in ArcCatalog that we downloaded? I noticed they were just showing up as a list in your
Right. So the question is, how did I just get to those sample scripts inside of ArcCatalog, through the catalog window? Well, when I downloaded those samples, I put them inside of the folder that the MXD is. And so those are toolboxes. So those toolboxes just automatically show up, and they're all been created with relative paths. So as long as you take the scripts in the toolboxes and move them in a relative sense, it doesn't matter where you put them. Okay. I just did it that way intentionally because I didn't want to have to go browse for them and spend more clicks. So I just put them right in the same folder as my MXD because that's the home folder, right? So I just see it. Good question. Right here?
In your example of resourcing a document from one data source to another, how does the MXD behave if you have multiple data sources in that MXD?
Not a problem. Very good question. So my map document has SDE connections, probably different SDE connections, right? Different servers. I may have file databases. I may have shape files. the workspace, that function, if you do it at the map document level, replace workspaces, you're only doing one at a time. So if you have 6 different workspaces that you want to switch out to 6 other workspaces, you execute that command 6 times. Because it's not going to replace them all. It's only going to find those that it finds. So find this and replace it with this. Well, that's only going to work for 1/6 of them, right? So then you run it again for the others. And again, if we go to help and we go to the root level of ArcPy here, I'm sorry, the mapping module, here's updating and fixing data sources. We can do it at the map document level, we can do it at the layer level, and at the table level. So there's a total of 6 functions. And I mean, just, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of samples because it's a big topic. And it can be really tricky. But we are pretty sure that we can accommodate the scenarios. Yes?
There are some big changes in version 3 of Python when it comes to syntax or so on.
Are there some big changes in Python 3?
Yeah.
Right. So right now we're running at 2.7. And our 10x software will continue to work with 2.7. We have no plans of migrating to 3. I don't think we support 3 because they are pretty different platforms. We are considering with our next release, our next big release, whenever that is, don't ask me any dates, we are considering Python 3. But right now, 10.2 continues to run on Python 2.7. I don't think it's recommended. Yeah, I don't know of anyone in Esri that's doing it. Because I don't think it's supported. But I'm not sure. You know. Yes?
Could you automate the transfer of the data as well as the source? Like if you want to do it all in one big...
Okay, so the question is, can I automate the data, not only the source? That would be a standard GP function. Right? That has nothing to do with ArcPy mapping. In that case, I'd do a copy features or some sort of migration using GP, create a brand new feature class and load features into it, and then use that data source in all my map documents. So that would be standard just geoprocessing at the ArcPy level. Okay, yes?
You mentioned a lot, it makes sense that Python or ArcPy is kind of like the simpler level or coarser level. If you, for example, wrote like an add-in or something that tried to do something more specific, but then you wanted to cycle through a group of MXDs and then run that add-in, can you run an add-in within an ArcPy script?
So the question is, can I run an add-in within a Python script? Are you talking about Python add-ins?
Like a .NET add-in.
Okay, so so first off, I just want to say there are Python add-ins. So you develop a Python add-in. It's Python. It's a Python script, and it has all sorts of event handlers and that sort of stuff. So in your case, you want to run a .NET add-in.
I've created something, and I just want to be able to do the legwork that you can sort of do more.
You can shell out. You can execute a Python script from within a .NET. Right? You can shell that out because it's happening in the background. It wouldn't work with current. That wouldn't happen. I don't think that would happen. At least I've never tried that.
From within the Py, can you do the .NET?
Yeah, that's.
So,
You can do the .NET
oh.
Py. He wants the opposite of that.
Okay, so now you're getting really complicated. Okay, so there is, and I'm going to have you go and do your homework on this. You can call ArcObjects from Python. Okay, and this is a very advanced topic. You want to work with a module called ComTypes. So let's say that Python can do 99% of the things you want to do, but there's this one thing you can't do, and now it requires that you have to work with ArcObjects. Well, like for example, you can't get the page units from a map document. And this was a requirement that we had got from someone. It's like, well, I need the page units because I work with many organizations, and I need to know which page units are so I can determine the size of the page, and which printer to send it to. Okay. Using COM types, and if I can give you my business card and I give you a sample of how it works, we're able to call ArcObjects to get the page size, the page units using ArcObjects and then passing that back to Python. But it's possible. There are user forums out there that talk about it. Do a search on COM types and it'll get you most of the way there. Okay? Well, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, come talk to myself or Jeff, and we'd love to help you and we'd love to see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.